We just started dating a few months before our big year started, actually.
Wow.
Great first date. Let's go to the dump and look at gulls.
We had a spreadsheet of species that we only got in other people's yards. Of all the birds that were possible for the year, probably the one that frustrates us the most is Townsend's warbler.
You have that. I don't have that. It was a dream because every single year I would see the ABA Bird of the Year artists and I would always wonder, oh my gosh, these artists are so lucky. How do they get to do this? Reached out to them and asked them, how do these artists get to have this amazing opportunity? My artwork, I like to have a message behind it. It took me a little bit to think of a reasonable plan, a reasonable illustration that I could do within the time period that I had.
Happy Podcast Day, one and all. Welcome to the Big Ear Podcast. Thank you once again for joining me. We have a lot to get to this month, so I'm going to keep this brief. Well, for me, not sure about for you. It is April 15th, 2025, and spring migration is well underway here in southwestern Ontario, and so is allergy season for me. It's actually a bit of a miracle that I finished this episode on time because the last 2 weeks have been very busy for me and my fellow birders. It started with a Western Grebe in Port Colborne, a Black-headed Gull at Port Colborne, followed by a Long-billed Dowitcher right here in Brant County. The fun continued with over 50 American White Pelicans at Holiday Beach and a female Harlequin Duck down in Chatham-Kent. I also got my first Ruffed Grouse and common Loon for Brant County, but the real excitement for the week was the chase for a Crested Caracara in Essex County, not too far from the Ontario-Michigan border on April 7th. Dozens of birders flocked to the small town of Amherstburg for a once-in-a-lifetime look at this large falcon that had lost its way. This bird should really have been in Texas, and after a long day of searching seemed to have returned home. I then tried for the yellow-headed blackbird back in Chatham, but the near blizzard conditions sent me home to contemplate missed opportunities once again. However, on Wednesday, the weather was pretty nice, so I decided to go back and look for the yellow-headed blackbird. To my complete surprise, before I even arrived at McGeechee Pond, I was alerted to the return of the Caracara. Not in Amherstburg, but right there in Chatham, only 15 minutes from where I was pulled off to the side of the road. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. I drove, I saw, I counted. A new Canada lifer. And I got to spend some time with my favorite birding friends, including Kelly Sue, who you met on season 1 of the podcast. Her story was even better than mine, as she lived around the corner about 5 minutes away and was there in an instant to get a look at this bird. And yesterday we had another bird party as dozens of us migrated to Stony Creek for a rare sighting of a loggerhead shrike. And all through that, I am trying to find time to finish this podcast. But enough about me. Let's just jump into this episode with Robert and Natasza from Florida, who have 2 great stories to share, one of art and one of big years. So here we go. Hello, it's wonderful to talk to you. I discovered your Instagram around the time the ABA Bird of the Year artist was being announced. And when I saw that, I was very intrigued. Every year I check out the artist, but when I saw your Instagram page, it said something that sounded like Florida Big Ear. I think I want to start with your art because that's how I discovered you. Was it a dream of yours to become the artist who had the ABA Bird of the Year? Was that just something where they discovered you and said, you're the artist?
Yeah, it wasn't a long-term dream, but it was definitely a dream. It's not a dream that I had since I was a child because I didn't know. So that's why I'm saying like it wasn't a long-term dream in that sense, but it was a dream because every single year I would see the ABA Bird of the Year artist and I would always wonder, oh my gosh, these artists are so lucky. How do they get to do this? And I would keep doing my artwork on my own with the thought in mind of maybe one day that'll be me.
And were you looking at the work of the other artists and thinking, I can do that, I can even do better? Or were you actively trying to make your art better and increase your skills, increase your ability to create something that you would select?
Yeah. So I would be looking at it and basically saying, how can I be that good?
My brain says, I'm never going to be that good. Why do I even try? But then I continue everything I do. I keep trying, and failure motivates me sometimes more than success.
I wouldn't say that was my motivation, but it would just be like, oh, I guess not this year. Let me keep working at it and see what happens. And then I basically reached out to them and asked them, how do these artists get to have this amazing opportunity? I didn't hear anything back for a little while. Once again, I was like, I guess that's that. And then sometimes I get like these nagging feelings, I would say. And it was like, all right, let me just email them again. Email someone else. Let me find someone else's name and ask them, because no one responded to me at first. I'm pretty sure I just didn't send it to the right person. Everybody's busy and so forth. There's this artist that's like, how do I get to do this? What's the application process kind of thing? They finally got back to me. I sent them my resume and some pieces of artwork. And I was like, all right, I put it out there. I finally got in touch with someone. I put it out there. If they like it, if they don't, and that's the end of that. But I finally put it out there. And then one day I got an email and was like, hey, would you be interested? And I'm like, yes.
It's pretty exciting. How many years was this process from the time you started till you got accepted? Was that reasonably quick by artist standards?
No, it wasn't reasonably quick. It took me a while to even get the guts to be like, all right, I'm going to reach out to someone. So that took a little while. Sometimes I suffer from, I don't know, maybe typical artist mindset of like, my work sucks.
Once they said you could do the painting, was it a process of doing multiple birds or multiple versions of the one bird?
Oh no, they select the bird and then I create from there. So the golden wing warbler was selected as the bird of the year, and I had already accepted the assignment before I even knew what bird it was. I just said yes. I was like, whatever bird it is, I'll make it work. I am not saying no to this opportunity because I've been wanting to do it for some time. When I found out that it was a golden wing warbler, I was extremely excited, really happy about it. After that, finally calming down, I was able to start thinking about what I want to do and thinking about what message do I want to send. Because a lot of times with my artwork, I like to have a message behind it or have it present something in some way. But it took me a little bit to think of a reasonable plan, a reasonable illustration that I could do within the time period that I had.
And how long did they give you to actually have it finalized?
I think we found out in May.
Typically for you, once you set on a painting, whether it's the golden winged warbler or any of your other work, is it a process where you go from pencil drawing to adding colored pencils to then finally doing the actual painting?
The cover, the only thing that's painted in that color is the background. Everything else is color pencil. My favorite medium is graphite, and then I go into color pencil. Most recently, I started messing around with oil pastels. Very far and few, I will use watercolor, but graphite is my go-to medium. My process basically is doing some research and thinking about how I want it to be portrayed, but really doing research about the bird and finding out habitats and behavior. And then that fuels me to get an idea of how I want to create an illustration. Sometimes I don't do any of that. If I'm doing like a portrait, I don't need to do this.
Is your goal to do the, I guess, the idealized version of the bird where you several field marks that you may not see in any one bird, but get the sense of that bird, even if it's not something you'd see if you just were looking at it?
I try to be as accurate as possible. And so I guess, yeah, I go through a lot of different images. I'll do an extensive image search. And of course, being careful of copyright, I never copy a photographer's exact image. They're really just photos. And then from there, yeah, I try to be as exact and include as many characters as I can, depending on the position of the bird.
And did you go out in the spring and seek out golden wing warblers to get your own photos and images to work from? Or was that just not something you had the time to do?
First, I'm always looking for golden wing.
We all are.
In spring and fall migration, I'm always looking for them. But at that moment in time, I wasn't able to go out and get my own images, which I do. I take photos, but my photos primarily, like I'm thinking about using them for illustrations, not necessarily.
That was exciting. And of course, watching the unveiling of it it's a very fun little ceremony. The artist who gets to have their painting definitely is a thrill for anyone. And definitely as much fun as it is, it's also something you can take with you forever. That, especially when you set a goal. That's how I ended up getting into birding. I discovered there was such a thing as a big year, and my wife was a birder. I was not, but I loved taking photos. So I decided in 2012, I'm just going to do a big year. And from then it snowballed and I became a chaser. Was that the case with you guys before you decided to do a big year?
That was the case for me. I was definitely the chaser and lister type for sure.
So your story, Robert. Where did you get your inspiration for birding from?
I've always been a nature nut. I've always had various interests in some form of biology and wildlife. First, it started with fish and fishing. Then it went to reptiles and amphibians, then carnivorous plants. And then senior year of college, I took ornithology class. And so that was 2010. So that's when it all started to snowball. I had already paid attention to lots of birds. I knew the names of big birds, hawks, waders. I intentionally learned the name of the boat-tailed grackle because the sound of them in McDonald's parking lot so annoying that I was like, I want to know that one's name just to know what it is.
The common myna is the bird in South Florida for the McDonald's and Walmart parking lots. I've never seen one outside of a dumpster parking lot. So were you already together at the time?
No, we just started dating a few months before our big year started, actually.
Wow. And that's funny because I was talking about that with someone, seeing gulls in trash and in landfill sites and places like that. And I commented, probably many a first date has happened in one of those dumpsters in parking lots.
Yeah, this is a great first date. Let's go to the dump and look at gulls.
Was it quite like that, or was it maybe a few days after you met?
We met on a birding trip. So I had just moved from New York to Tallahassee because I started grad school and I was new to the area. I was looking for birding spots. So I joined the local Audubon chapter and would go on their field trips. And basically there was this one special field trip. It was a larger group this time that was going out on a property that they wanted to have more develop a bird list basically consistently. So they invited birders to come and bird the property. And that's where we met. So he ended up finally coming to an Audubon trip because he usually doesn't that.
Our mutual friend was leading the trip and had finally gotten me to go.
From the first meeting, you just clicked with birding. How did you decide, how can we spend our first year together?
That's how it happened.
I had already been wanting to do a big year, a Florida big year specifically. So we met October 2019 and then mid-January 2020 is when we decided to do the big year.
Yeah.
I had been wanting to do one for several years and had actually already planned to do one in 2021, thinking that maybe I could figure out the whole El Nino cycle. And then we met and I told her about that aspiration and pretty much it was, let's just do it.
Yeah, I was chasing audio. I had just started getting more comfortable with North Florida. So I was like, for example, I wanted to get better audio recordings of Kite. So I had taken a road trip down to Corkscrew Swamp to see if I can get recordings of them down there. And I was leaving the area of Tallahassee little by little, chasing audio. That's when I was like, let's just do it. Naive.
So you were chasing audio. What were you chasing? Lifers or just rarities or just so
I was already a rarity chaser by then. In 2018, I had hit my goal of getting 300 in Florida. I had set some other goals for myself as well as doing a Florida big year. 400 in Florida was a goal. And then also surpassing my late friend John Erickson's life list in Florida was a goal. I think that was 365 or 367. Somewhere, no, 350 something. Yeah, it was 50 something still. That January, New Year's Eve going into 2020, we were at Everglades National Park in Flamingo camping, and we were doing a South Florida tour picking up winter rarities for South Florida. So we got like brown-crested flycatcher, and we got really lucky that there was a Lasagras flycatcher. Yes. We picked up a few good birds, probably 8 to 10 rarities over that trip. Once we got back home, the first week of January, another week or so later, we decided
our number was pretty good.
Were you checking eBird to see where you were for the year and thought, oh, we're way up there. Maybe we have a chance to do a big year and maybe even break a record? Or was that not a thought at the time?
We weren't numbers chasing that trip. We were really rarity chasing. Yeah. So our numbers weren't impressive. I'm not even sure we had passed 100 at that point.
I think we were close. We were like 99 or something.
And so we weren't going for numbers at the time. At the time, we weren't thinking, oh, we've already got so many birds. That wasn't the thought. It was more of, let's do this. Let's see.
Yeah.
Because you started in January, you didn't have it all pre-planned, which many a big ear birder has failed to do. For a lot of us, even though we didn't plan it, making it up as we went has been a lot of the fun of it as well. Once you decided, okay, let's do this, did you then check to see what the big year record for Florida was?
Yes, although we thought we knew it at the time. Yeah. David Simpson's record was, I think that was 357.
I don't remember exactly.
I forget the numbers.
Sorry, David. We know who had the record.
David Simpson had the one that was on paper for the longest time. Yeah. Someone else who I don't know had surpassed David's record, and that was was the known record, but it hadn't been record kept. I just remember hearing in passing that there was another number. I forget what it was now. Too many years have passed. Then we found out that several other people had done a 2019 Florida Big Year. The record got broken by, I think, so there was a couple and then a single individual. I think both or the three of them all broke the past record. The couple had the highest record.
How much of this did you do completely together, and were there times where you were each on your own?
We started off completely together. I'm also in grad school while I'm doing this because why not make that great choice? So basically, in the beginning, we were doing everything together, but then it came to a breaking point that I couldn't push anymore. So he went to chase a few birds alone.
2 weekends.
Yeah, it was 2 weekends because I just couldn't do it. I had to work on my research. About 3/4 through, after the summer.
Yeah, so
Come
it
to
was
fall.
in fall.
Yeah, that's when he went off on his own a few times because it just came to a point of that I couldn't make it.
And do you think going off on your own and not having that second pair of eyes affected your final total? Or do you think that together there wasn't anything you chased that you wouldn't have both gotten?
Let me think about that one. I remember exactly every spot I hit. The first trip I remember being down to Sarasota. Of all the birds that were possible for the year, probably the one that frustrates us the most is Townsend's warbler.
You have that. I don't have that.
Oh yeah,
that's the discrepancy. Yeah, that's one of our discrepancies.
That one wasn't calling or anything, so her ears weren't going to help on that particular bird. We spent 3 weekends chasing that bird together, and even once had it spotted by other birders around us,
Maybe
like 7 other birders around us, and we just didn't see the moment it came out of the leaves for just a brief moment.
One of those things that frustrates me, instead of thinking it was just the luck of where you're looking, I always would blame myself for being a crappy birder. But I talked to so many different people. Good birders sometimes miss good birds because it only appeared for 3 seconds.
That's pretty much what it was. In fact, I think everybody else in that group was stunned we didn't see it.
Yeah, they're like,
I
don't understand what right there means. Even though I say that all the time too.
It's funny. I've been in conversations with some of our local birders, and we're talking about a bird that everyone's seen. And, oh yeah, I haven't got that this year. And they're going, what do you mean you don't have that bird? They almost make you feel like you can't do anything right. You can't see that bird that everybody else saw. So once January started, did you get a plan for where you had to hit in season?
Before we get to that, I still wanted to do a comment on Tiffany Kirsten's comment.
Okay.
I had never thought of that before hearing her podcast, that, oh yeah, especially hers is an ABA big year. It's a much bigger geographical area. And so, yeah, I can see how having 2 people is a massive help for the logistics. Natasza has extraordinary ear birding.
I was going to ask about that because you said I didn't have Natasza's ears.
There are many things I would never have gotten because I wouldn't have known the call, or we found out there are sounds I don't hear that she hears.
Yeah.
I do see Tiffany's point of I did this all by myself.
I see how that puts an asterisk.
There are other people that are birding with you. There are people who take you to spots to see birds that you may not have been able to see yourself. Certainly there are spots in South Florida that you do need someone to escort you. How much of that did you depend on your connections with the birding world in Florida?
We had a spreadsheet of all of our species and various stats. One of them was species that we only got in other people's yards.
Speaking of Larry Manfredi, I've talked to so many people and no one seems to be able to do a big year without passing through Larry Manfredi's backyard for shiny cowbird.
We birded with Larry several times, but we never did go to his yard.
Shiny cowbird there.
We got it at a little park called Mash's Sands in Wakulla County in the Panhandle.
Yeah,
Hopping around in front of the porta potties.
Garbage dump birds. How many did you get only because you were in the backs of McDonald's and in trash heaps?
I think Common Mina's probably it.
Yeah.
Bronzed cowbird.
Yeah,
Bronzed cowbird was also
yeah.
a parking lot bird. It's the only place we got that. For species that we had in other people's backyards, there were 13 species that the only time we saw them was somebody else's backyard.
Can you think of some of them that I'd be, oh yeah, then no wonder I've never seen one of those in Florida.
Okay, oh yeah, I gotta go. First state record, Scott's Oriole.
Oh my God, that was so nuts. Oh my God.
That was one of my favorites because I got it on my lunch break. It was in Tallahassee. So everybody in town had been waiting for days to find out if this homeowner was going to let people. Within an hour of getting notice that they were letting people, took a lunch break. We both met there. We got the bird and under half an hour. And within the hour, I was back at work.
Yeah. And it's funny because the guy was saying that the bird was there last year.
Yeah, he had photographed the bird, I think, 2 previous winters.
Wow.
But didn't know what it was.
It's not a birder. He didn't really know. And just finally this year, he was like, let me just see if I could find out what this is. And for state record.
The reason it got reported was the Great Backyard Bird Count.
It's interesting to research how many state or even ABA records have been discovered because of the Great Backyard Bird Count. Certainly a way for non-birders to go, oh, I think I'd like to contribute. More people get feeders, and the whole idea of citizen science has become bigger in the last 5-6 years than it's ever been. The Great Backyard Bird Count is certainly part of that. In my area, in Ontario, we get a lot of people discovering rare birds in their backyards. It never seems to be one of the local birders who recognize these things. It's someone who takes a picture of a bird at their feeder and wonders what it is. They put it on Facebook, and then a birder on Facebook says, "You've got a calliope hummingbird in your backyard?"
Shut this down now. You don't know what's about to happen to your house.
In Ontario, we have an ambassador program that reaches out to homeowners to make it organized for birders to come to their backyards. How does that work in Florida? Do you have some sort of program as well with the Florida Audubon?
Usually someone local ends up taking that role. It's not anything organized at a state level or within the bird community level even. It's just usually someone nearby is like, oh, I know I want this bird, so let me help other people get the bird. And, you know.
It's funny, the black-backed oriole in Pennsylvania that I went to see quite a while ago, the homeowner did not want people standing on her lawn, but the person who lived across the road opened up his driveway for birders to.
Oh, wow.
He made coffee, had cookies, a sign-in book, and a donation for feed.
Wow.
I said, it's a good thing that she had a birder across the road. And he said, I'm not a birder. I said, really? So it sounds like you're going to get into birding. Once this is gone, I'm done. And I was so surprised that regardless of his interest in birds, he was interested in helping the community. Did you make certain trips to get specific birds at specific times of year once February, March, and migration started?
We should answer this. We set up the eBird alerts, and we had them on hourly. In a nutshell, what would happen is we knew what species we could get in our area and what time of the year, but we really relied on eBird and those alerts. Whenever a rarity would pop up, we would just hope that it's still there for the weekend, because that's the only time that we had to really chase. And we would just watch it. He would do a lot of reaching out to people and getting connected. Have you seen a bird today? Keeping track of that. And then we'd have our route of which birds to chase while watching eBird throughout the week.
Obviously, you were always starting in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Did you have a limit to how far you would go for the birds?
So for like year-round or summer breeding Florida birds, most of them we just got along the way. A lot of them we didn't have to chase. We happen to be right near one of the biggest red-cockaded woodpecker populations in the world. And
that's where I got my Florida one.
So that one wasn't something that was a particularly chase-driven bird.
Yeah.
A lot of other people would be looking for because it's a southeastern specialty. I think the only things we had to really, for regular occurring birds, that we had to make special efforts for were mangrove cuckoo, black-whiskered vireo, and barn owl.
I've had the black-whiskered vireo and the mangrove cuckoo and spent hours and hours listening. I never saw it other than the leaves moving as it went from one spot to the other. Did it come out for you?
Yeah, not the first, second, third, fourth,
The
or
12th
fifth.
or the 13th. Was our 14th time looking for mangrove cuckoo on December 30th.
Had you already counted it as a herd bird?
No. It first hit our list on December 30th.
If I was going to ask you what your nemesis bird was for the year, that would have been high on the list.
On December 29th, that would have been the end. We definitely had a few nemesis birds. White-cheeked pintail escaped us over and over. I think we went 5 times down to Naples for that.
Yep.
And like we had people reported within a couple of hours of us.
Yeah, it was just a matter of timing.
A black-billed cuckoo we never got. Went on a lot of chases for that. Townsend's warbler was a nemesis and still is a nemesis, even though I got it. I got it for under a minute.
We've only had one in Ontario that I know of, and I did get to see it. That was one of the rare occasions where it was in the backyard of one of the more famous birders in Ontario. I talked to him once, and he said the reason he chose the spot for his house was for his backyard bird list. And he has a huge yard list, but he's also had a number of good rarities come to his yard as well. It's not a bird I would think of as something that would ever show up in Florida. Was it even on your radar, or was it that one also a first state record?
I think I should have that on a spreadsheet.
I am a spreadsheet guy. I was using spreadsheets in 1986 when they were brand new.
For Townsend's Warbler, I think there were only a handful of records before. I think there's less than 10 total. That year had a spring and fall showing in a park of Townsend's Warbler. The park is like 5 acres at best. Probably the same bird returning to that same park. That was a bird that was not on our radar. We did not think that one was going to happen, especially after we didn't get it in March or whenever it was.
The other bird that was iffy or still is iffy, the Indian peafowl.
Did we get to count that?
Yeah, we did. Eventually.
Okay, so that one's actually at the very end of our list. I'm not sure on Indian peafowl that one came about. What happened for 2020 was ABA decided to set a standard and some sort of definition for the exotics. Several species became countable.
Gray-headed swamp hen.
Now that we're 4 years past it, I can't even remember which species were and weren't countable for the exotics. But I know we were able to put 5 or 6 species on the list that weren't previously considered countable for Florida. I know 2 of them were parakeets.
For you guys, you weren't using eBird to see the record you were chasing. You were using local knowledge of Florida birders.
We knew what the number was. It shifted at one point once those exotics became countable. I don't remember what the first number was, and they were able to tack a few more onto it. We were seeking guidance from ABA, who would not respond, about the exotics because it's on the ABA list. But prior to the July update, they made no wording on what populations were countable. They had a definition of what established was, but no list of which populations of which birds were considered established. So we weren't entirely sure what we could count up until they did their July update. That helped us figure out the exotics because at some points we weren't sure what to chase because if it wasn't going to be countable, we weren't going to use our time on it.
And the catch-22 is that if the bird is added to the list during the year you saw it, then it's acceptable. But the first records may not be until 2 months after your big year that it's accepted. So that can shift the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, we didn't have any plus ones like a lot of the ABA big year birders have. We didn't have any ABA first records. And so since we're going by ABA's checklist, we had no provisional species. Our only question was which exotics were countable.
And how many did you end up being able to?
Yeah, I think there was a kicking the can down the road on exotics, I think. Our Indian peafowl did come from Crandon Park, which is like the main population that has been self-reproducing for years.
I have been there.
So like our ones that got like the Keys backyards, those weren't the ones we considered the countable ones for our list. In total, we had 19 exotic.
That included the gray-headed swamp hen?
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
Yep.
And did you get it at Dolphin Mall?
No.
I thought everyone got their...
I didn't even know they had them there.
When I went on the South Florida Exotics bus tour, they took us to Dolphin Mall to see the swamp and to Ocean's Bank to see the white-winged parakeets.
That is where we got white-winged and
yellow chevron,
The places South Florida that I've been to at this point, it's been so long I can't pronounce some of the names, Wakatahatchee.
Yeah. We went to Wakatahatchee. We didn't spend a lot of time there. I think we only went twice in the whole year. I actually grew up in Boynton Beach, right near Wakatahatchee. I used to go there all the time as a kid before there were gray-headed swamp hens there, because now there are. We went to Wakatahatchee because of the neotropic cormorant.
I've got that bird from Wakatahatchee. I remember having to scope through 100 other birds to find it. I spent almost 30 years going to Florida. One of my favorites was Fort DeSoto. In 20, there was probably the best fallout I ever saw, and it was at Fort DeSoto. I didn't understand much about fallouts because I was so new to birding. I'm driving along because I had seen on eBird that there was a gull that I wanted to see. So I'm driving to the end of the east side, and the grass was just covered in blue dots. As I'm getting closer, I realized it was like 1,000 indigo buntings on the grass. And I was like, what is this? Someone told me, oh, the storm yesterday. And I was like, oh, yeah, I flew through it on the way down. People were telling me the trees were like Christmas trees with ornaments on them. People were saying you should have been here yesterday, or there's even more. And I was like, how could there even be more than what we're seeing now? Was that one of your things that you were chasing? Were you chasing a fallout during the course of the year? And what was the best situation that you had?
During the course of the big year,
We tried chasing fallouts. We didn't get a fallout.
No, we didn't.
We never actually had a fallout during 2020. We had some good migration days, but not fallouts.
Not fallout condition.
My first actually at Port DeSoto, just like you.
I love fallout stories. What I didn't understand at the time, because this was April 25th, and I'm thinking migration is in May, but not realizing migration in Florida is in late March and April. So was it an awe-inspiring experience for you?
So mine at Port DeSoto, that was third week of April 2018. I was on the other side of the state in Melbourne, got a banana quit for that day, and then drove over to Fort DeSoto as part of my loop back up north. It was a fallout. And yeah, it was incredible. 1,000 indigo buntings on the ground. There was one point where there's like this bench set up behind some trees, and I think there were over 10 male painted buntings on the ground. That was wild. I got a bunch of lifers that day. My first golden winged warbler was that day.
Is it you have to just live there to be able to get them when they do show up?
It's definitely an every year bird, but it's never an abundant bird.
Yeah.
Other than maybe a fallout with more than 2. Yeah, it's abundant.
I've never seemed to have got a good picture of a golden winged warbler, but I have seen some nice paintings of them. The big trip is the dry tortugas. And was that something you did only in the spring, or did you go back more than once?
I wish we went back more than once, but that was during COVID.
God, that's right. You were doing a COVID big year.
We did a COVID big year.
COVID wasn't big enough.
Exactly.
It's COVID-19. That's old news.
Yeah, exactly. So we got on, I think it was either the first or the second dry tortugas trip once they opened.
Second, yeah.
It was a second. Okay, opened back up. So we had already thought that's not going to happen. But then when they started like slowly opening back up, we were like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, we got really lucky. We bought tickets before everything got shut down. So we had made the choice like, okay, we got to go to Dry Tortugas to try and get Black Knotty was really the main goal. And yeah, everything got shut down. And then once word got through that the Keys were thinking about opening up, I started sending them emails. How are you going to figure out who goes?
We're doing a big year. You have to let us go first.
They got back to me and were like, okay, we can put you on the second trip. And we're like, all right, we'll be there.
Of the birds that you got, how many were year birds that only were the Dry Tortugas?
I think it's just Black Knotty.
Brown Knotty.
Oh, did you get brown knotty?
That's right.
We never thought about that
story.
So yeah, I actually think Black Knotty is the only bird that we never saw any other time.
Something I didn't think about in terms of doing a Florida big year was the pelagics. I have trouble with them because I get seasick, and I have about a 50-50 success rate with not getting seasick. Are you both pretty good with being on boats, or is there an interesting story to tell?
Okay, so there's several interesting stories. Let's start with backstory real quick. That pelagics was probably one of the hardest things for our big year. That's where we missed the most numbers of birds. That's where the most potential is still left on the table. I think there were over 10 pelagic species that we never got, that we could have gotten. That weren't even like ridiculous rarities or anything, because COVID happened, everybody canceled all their pelagics. And so we couldn't get out on any boats until September. That was our only pelagic trip. We both got seasick.
Yeah, that was rough. I was throwing up so badly that I started to pass out a little bit, fall asleep, and somehow I managed to pick up the binoculars at the same time. Like, all right, let me just look. And then it'd be like, all right, I'm going back to sleep. And look again. So I'd be going in and out. And so every single time I was going in and out, this is after a very violent puking session, which is why I was going in and out of sleeping. I would be helping look for birds or get on a bird, and I'd go back to sleep a little bit.
You did pick up on a bird. You got to tell that part of the story. Yeah.
I'm leaving that detail out right now because I just wanted to tell you your puking part. It wasn't that extensive.
I've been on boats a lot. I grew up in Florida and I like fishing. So I've been on a fair amount of boats, big party boats that are like 60 footers in up to 9 to 12 foot seas. I've never been seasick in my life, but I got seasick that day for an hour or so.
Yeah. And a few other people got sick as well. It was pretty rough out there.
It's not like we were the weaklings.
It's a great equalizer because you could be puking right next to a lawyer or a doctor or a millionaire, and you're all the same when that happens. Is advantage to whatever it is you think is special about you when you're at the back of a boat throwing up. My first Dry Tortugas trip was coming back. They were handing us garbage bags to throw up in. I don't think I ever want to experience anything like that again. Since then, I discovered the scopolamine patch, except now you can't even get them anymore. So you have to go with other methods. And I'm just like, fill me up with Dramamine. I'll fall asleep on the way back, but at least I'll be able to bird on the way out. Have you thought, now that is over and everything's open back up again, maybe you will try it again and see if we can get a bigger list because you can go on more pelagic?
His answer is a flat no. If I had the finances and the time, I would do it again. Maybe I'd do a lower 48 or something.
You do know that many people who have done these lower 48 big years did not have the finances or the time, but they just kept doing it anyway.
With that being said, I already did 1 year without the finances and the time. I don't want to do a second one. So let's just be clear. I get it.
The next time you want to be able to fly first class.
Maybe not first class, but
maybe sleep in a hotel.
That's another question I was going to ask, because on a few of my trips down to South Florida, I have slept in the back of my car. Did you do a lot of camping?
That's all we did.
All camping?
Yep.
Yeah. I think February was the last time we slept at somebody's house. The rest of the time was sleeping in the back of the car or sleeping in tent.
You don't have to worry about driving at night in Florida with hitting moose, but there must be other situations where driving at night is not exactly the safest thing to be doing.
Natasza wasn't there. She doesn't remember, but I drove through the night almost every Friday night.
He is such a liar. Okay. For the Bill video, I drove the entire night.
That is true. She drove Cedar Key to Long Key State Park.
How far was that?
From Cedar Key to Long Key State Park, I think it was 7 hours.
Yeah, we got there at like 3.
We were supposed to be leaving Cedar Key. It was like 5 o'clock, and an eBird email came in that there was thick-billed vireo at Long Key State Park. And we looked at each other and said,
I guess this is happening again.
The one I didn't get, and still haven't, is Key West quail dove. Was that on your list for your big year?
It did get seen by, I think, only one person. I'll probably misquote the story too much to tell the real story, but it was a very unusual scenario. Like, the person who found it with infrared binoculars.
Yeah.
And then was able to get photos. So it's photo documented. It's a real bird. And then this was down at Zachary Taylor State Park in Key West. And then it was like, in hours, it was never seen again.
Yeah. But we had one of our camping night driving stories. You want to tell them about the KOA? Okay.
How PG does this need to be?
I've told stories of having to poop on the side of the road with ice pellets hitting my rear end. So if it's in that category, then go right ahead.
We'll see. So we were chasing, this is Christmas Eve, and we're chasing black-throated gray warbler, right? Yeah, in the Cape Canaveral area. It's only like the 3rd record for Florida. Nobody expected a bird. We got to a campsite in Titusville, which is just off the Cape. Do not go to that KOA driving. I don't care how far it is to the next campground.
Just don't.
Keep
Please
moving. We got there, and half of it looked like a homeless encampment where people had clearly been there for months in tents. The other half was RVs that had been there so long they're covered in algae. It really seemed like we just dropped into a meth park. There were people, there was an argument in the middle of the night.
Someone was sleeping on the floor in the women's bathroom.
Dozens of feral cats around. We barely slept. Like, for fear of our own safety, which I rarely have, for fear of our own safety, we barely slept. We got up an hour before we needed to. Our bodies woke up and we said, let's just go.
It's like, are you going to make coffee? I was like, no, we're leaving.
We'll never be back to that campground. We have had plenty of other people tell us other KOAs are fine. That one
in particular is not.
I was in Northern Ontario, and I am not allowed to be the travel agent for Sue and I when we go on trips, because I just find a hotel wherever I am at the end of the day. And I got to this town, and the hotel I wanted to stay in was full. The hotel I would prefer to not stay in, but I find okay, was full. I went to the last choice, and it was drug infested. There were 20 motorcycles in the back parking lot of scary looking people. I got into the room and rust was dripping from the air conditioner. The bed looked like bedding hadn't been washed from the last person who was there. I shuddered and went back to the front desk Even though there was someone trying to check in, I went right to the front desk and said, I want my money back. There's no way I can stay in this hotel. I'm telling the people behind the counter what, and then of course there's 3 people standing behind me who are wanting a room because everything else is sold out. He wanted to get rid of me as fast as possible, so he refunded my money. I got in the car and I kept driving. At one point, I just had enough and I pulled off into what I thought was a side road and fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up. I hear a bunch of loud engine noises, and I had parked in the middle of a logging area. All these logging trucks were driving in just as I was using the bathroom beside my car. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize where I was. And this is like 6 a.m. and they're all piling in. I just jumped in the car and got the heck out of there before I got run over by giant Caterpillar trucks. To me, that's some of the fun of doing these trips in big years. You find yourself in places you never would have gone to. Were there places in Florida that you hadn't visited that you got to see only because you did a big year?
Lucky Hammock.
No, I'd been there. But for Natasza, I think the answer is yes to a lot more places. Sure.
What was one of your favorite places that you saw for the first time that you thought, how have I never been here before? Was that Lucky Hammock, which I haven't heard of?
Yeah, I would say that was one of, I wouldn't say nice place, but it was really great. There was always a rarity there. There was lots of birds there.
And where is the Lucky Hammock?
That's really far south.
It's about a mile outside of Everglades National Park.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. You know how there's 2 big canals as you go into the park, like before you get in? It's in between 2 canals.
Right near Robert's Ice Cream?
Down the road towards the Everglades.
Had to go in because it says Robert is here. I better be there then. Yeah, I've gone in there more than once. When I was there with Sue, I had to bring Sue to...
Yeah,
that place is fantastic.
That's a favorite place for sure. Where every time we were down there, and I think that's one of the reasons why I liked birding in Lucky Hammock, because we would always stop there and get our smoothies and just do they have all these nice jams and everything that I like to look at.
Fruits that you just can't get in North Florida.
Out there anywhere else. So, yeah.
To anyone listening goes to the Everglades, you have to stop at Robert is here. Yeah. It's amazing.
What was the very longest chase that you did from Tallahassee to where that you had to get to within the bounds of one weekend?
We went down to Key West a couple of weekends.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah, that would be the farthest.
And from Tallahassee to Key West, how far is that?
It's about 10 hours.
9-10 hours.
And would you do that sharing the drive all in one shot, or would you stop?
It was each time we did it, it was one, actually no, 2 out of 3 times we did it was one shot down to Key West overnight where we both shared the drive. And then another time we didn't make it and we stopped in Everglades National Park and camped there and then went to Key West. That was at the very end.
I love going to Key West. There's a place on the way called Palmer's Resort that I've stayed at numerous times. And then there's a restaurant not far from there where I would always go for key lime pie and rum runners. Is that something you are aficionados of? Did you seek out certain foods in certain areas when you were getting down to South Florida?
We would have if it weren't for COVID.
Yeah.
We always had our own food.
Yeah.
We didn't eat out until October, I think.
Like the end of the year, we just started to eat out. We would basically food prep for our weekend trips and cook all the meals and pack everything in a cooler. In the beginning, we ate out, and that just didn't end well. Eating out, it was just like
eating fast,
eating food. It just didn't end well.
Since 2012 and every other trip, I seek out key lime pies everywhere I go. That's one of the things I can't get enough of.
That's actually my favorite dessert.
We were seeking out for him. He really loves that.
Normally, if we go to South Florida, we are seeking out special food. We're looking for Cuban food, anything from the Caribbean, even authentic, well-made Asian foods. It just so happened during our big year, it was COVID, so we didn't get to.
It was the tail end of things not being 100% open or having to quarantine. We had more serious quarantines here in Canada. I thought that was going to impact me. Doing it at the end of COVID was one thing, but doing it in the middle of COVID, that seems like there must have been a few hiccups and a few things that you regret at this point that you didn't get.
Hold on one second. My cat is being very demanding.
I have 3.
Okay.
And I had to close the door to my studio because I would have a cat wandering in front of me, meowing the entire time.
You asked the question right when he was like feeding. It was really hard in the beginning because everything got locked down. And we couldn't get into the parks. I think it being during COVID time, it made it more difficult and also nerve-wracking to bird with other people. And it was just, I don't know. For me, it gave me a lot of anxiety.
Probably faced less traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be one thing that it helped us in. It definitely forced us in the spring to explore new places
Yeah.
and find new spots to bird. Shockingly, we did really well in the spring with migration. Even though all the state parks were shut down, we found a few pockets here and there and got some really good spring migration days
Yeah.
that got us everything we were expecting to get. I think the only thing COVID truly kept us back from was pelagics and then like comfort and getting to eat out at restaurants. That's really all COVID stopped us from. As far as did COVID help us with anything? Maybe just less traffic.
Yeah.
I know how many traffic jams I've run into on the way to Key West, where 2 hours of driving has taken 4 hours. So what was the number you finally ended up with?
My final number was 386.
And mine was 388.
Were both of those records?
No.
They were able to update their list because of the exotics. And so then it became, I beat the record by 1. So 388, mine is the record. 387 is the other couple's record. Got 386.
So the lower 48 big year can drive to Louisiana and Texas in one trip. So where you are in Tallahassee would be a really good spot to stage your lower 48 big year if you ever get to it.
It's a terrible place to stage a Florida big year.
Yeah,
we spent just short of 40 weekends in South Florida.
But the fact that you did this big year as a weekend big year is a testament to how successful and good you were at planning and timing things. Do you feel like there was as much luck as there was skill involved?
Yeah, that one was nice and short. As far as rarities for us, we didn't find a whole lot self-found. We mostly did chasing.
That's what got me into birding, the chase and the adventure of it all. For you, Natasza, was it meeting Robert, or was it something else that got you into birding?
I always like to say that I was birding before I knew what birding was. I was always looking at birds in my neighborhood. I didn't have a large diversity of birds. I would be watching birds. I was always listening to birds and just listening to sounds in general. So I didn't know I was birding when I was birding. I eventually had a field guide, and then I started making lists and so forth. When him and I met, I was already birding for...
What about you, Robert? What got you into birding?
Like I said earlier, I was always a nature nerd, and that ornithology class sparked me into wanting to learn the birds' names. No matter what my nature thing is, I love to figure out IDs and what it is. And I think I saw the big year around 2012, 2013, I think. And that's when I got into listing more seriously, chasing, and that's when I found out what a big year was. It planted the seed. I didn't immediately see the movie and be like, oh, I'm going to do that. But it definitely planted the seed.
I walked out of the theater with this. I want to do that. I want to do that. And then I got the book. I read the book. You have to remember, I was like you, Natasza, that I was birding before I was birding because I was taking pictures of birds in Florida because I travel.
That showed up.
And I had pictures of dozens and dozens of Florida birds and had no clue as to what a white ibis was or what a great blue heron was. I just had these pictures. Has becoming the ABA Artist of the Year given you opportunities?
There are opportunities, but they're just all scrambled. So it's hard for me to really just give you like a straight answer.
You do feel that it benefited you and will down the road?
Yeah, I think so, for sure, because a lot of people are recognizing it and recognizing that I'm both avian ecologist as well as an artist. And so I think that's a really nice thing.
Was there a little bit of fame and requests for interviews like this that you weren't prepared for? And were you comfortable with it? Or were you like, oh, not another one?
Yeah, there were quite a few requests. I am a little bit shy. So, I do the project, I do the work, and then I fly under the radar. It's a personal habit that I'm working on getting out of. Sometimes it's a little hard for me to be like, sure, I'll do this and I'll talk about myself on this podcast. It's hard for me to do that sometimes.
Anything else you'd like to add before we go? Because I've had a lot of disappointments on chases during big years. What was the bird that you didn't get that you ended the year thinking, oh, I was just that one bird, if we'd only got that one bird? Do you have one like that?
Yeah, for sure.
That stinking Townsend's warbler, that was painful. That hurt because it was weekend after weekend. And then I couldn't chase it anymore.
She's considering going to California later this year, and she's, I don't even want to see it. I don't even want it. I don't need it. Forget it.
I don't want the bird.
I don't like that bird anymore.
Unless it becomes a yard bird and have absolutely zero effort, except for my eyes being open. I do not want to chase that bird anywhere.
At least if you go to California, you sometimes don't even have to look for it. It'll just be there. And so, what's that? Oh, it's a Townsend warbler.
There's a few birds that still rub me the wrong way. Cuckoo, even though we got it, is one of them. We could have gotten so many other things not looking for that bird, potentially anyway. White-cheeked pintail really burns. That one still hurts a lot. We were down there in Naples so many times and had so many people report it the same day as us. And then, what was the other one? The easiest bird that we didn't get.
There's always one of those.
We never managed to come across a dick sissel. We saw reports all over the state, most of them being herd-only reports. We went on at least one chase to Pensacola, and we never could come across one. That's definitely the easiest bird, I think.
That's a bird I never even thought to look for when I was in Florida. I didn't even think you had them down there. Then again, anywhere I was in Florida, I never saw it on eBird. So that would have been the hardest bird for me. It was like, oh, wow, a dick sissel in Florida. I got to get that for my life list.
How much? Yeah, I did. Actually, I did. I got one in 2018. They come every year, but they're very short-term migrants, short stopovers.
It's black-whiskered vireo, which you have to be in the right spot at the right time for.
Vireo here is a summertime breeder in South Florida.
Oh, okay. Because I guess because I'm only in Florida 90% of the time, March and April, I always had to find it at Fort DeSoto.
Yeah, that's when they're first showing up usually.
Fort Zachary.
But it is one of those birds that you just have to be in the right place at the right time. Last summer, I got one while fishing. I was waist deep in water, heard one fly over the marsh that I was in. I was like, why couldn't that have happened in 2020?
That's one of the things in 2023 was I chased 6 birds that I didn't get in 2022 that I was pissed off about. I was like, I'm getting that bird. I don't care. I'm driving 6 hours. I'm getting that bird.
There is one relatively common bird that we skipped over locally over and over until we had to chase it in Key West.
Yeah, the blue-winged warbler. That was ridiculous. That was a classic case of taking for granted the situation.
Yeah.
And so if you want advice to people, don't take for granted the bird you can get right in front of you to go chase. Because if you do, you might end up like us, where last minute, now we've got to drive X amount of hours to get a bird where we could have just had it here.
One of the birders I was talking to always thought of each bird as 111, and it didn't matter if it was a rarity during a big year because it was the numbers that you were getting to. Did you get to a point where I just have to get the numbers and I don't care about the rarity or the species when you were getting close to breaking the record?
Not for me.
No, because there weren't any rarities left. I don't think we had any big rarities to chase. The thing that we had not focused on that we ended up chasing the last couple of days of the year were exotics. Some parrot in Palm Beach County was one of them. I didn't even realize before 2020 that it was even a bird in the state, much less a countable bird.
The rose-winged parakeet in Naples?
The one major site was in Palm Beach County, not very far from Trump's Mar-a-Lago. I can't remember what that one was, but it was parrot, not parakeet. It was large, like macaw size, but it wasn't called a macaw. I think it was Sataka genus, but I can't remember what that was. I wasn't very familiar with the bird before 2020. There were a couple exotics that we probably should have spent more time on in the summer when there wasn't any other major rarities to chase. But yeah, I would say that was about it in that scenario. We definitely never had, we got this one, but we missed 2. I don't remember ever having a time.
Frustrating piece of information that we found out on January 1st. It's December 31st, and we're back in our area, and we're out birding just to see, like, maybe we can get something, we're going for black rail, and it wasn't on our radar. But it was there and we missed it. And January 1st, we saw the report come in.
Iceland gull.
That was a first county record.
Did you try and hit every county? I know a lot of the local birders who do Ontario big years and some that have done British Columbia big years and Michigan big years, they try to hit every county. Seems like that would be easier to do in Florida because you just have to keep driving south. But was it was it something you tried to do?
We did drive through every county, but we didn't bird every County.
Yeah.
Do you do chases outside of Florida? Will you go for a bird in Louisiana or places like that if
If
they're
there
lifer?
was, if it was, yeah.
Yeah, we normally don't, but
Normally
yeah,
don't,
we
but of course we would. Yeah,
open
sure.
to it. If that stellar seagull ever gets anywhere near us.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the frustration of the Stellar Sea Eagle. First reported in Quebec in 21?
Yeah, I think so.
And I drove 16 hours to Quebec and didn't get to see it. And then last couple weeks of 2021, it turned up in Maine. I thought, oh, it only has to fly a little bit to get to Nova Scotia. I was in Nova Scotia for a week in January, and it never got to Nova Scotia from Maine. But then I left, showed up in Nova Scotia, so I flew back and didn't see it. And the second time it's in Nova Scotia, I flew back and didn't see it. Then it showed up in Newfoundland, and I was on my way to the ferry docks to take the ferry over to Newfoundland so I had booked with a guy who was taking people out on his Zodiac to see it. And I was on my way there, and I had a kidney stone episode. I have chronic kidney stones, and I know when I can get through it and when I can't. And I had to book a flight back to Toronto instead of going for the Stellar Sea Eagle, and had landed on a Monday and had surgery on a Wednesday. So that's how bad it was. In November, I was in Quebec looking for a field fair. I got 3 texts, an email, and a phone call that it shown up in New Brunswick, which was actually the very first place in Canada it was seen way back at the beginning before I went to Quebec. I drove 7 hours through a blizzard and horrible unpaved logging roads to get there to the spot at 7:30 in the morning, and someone said, oh, it was just seen 10 minutes ago. We spent the entire day waiting and driving around, and finally at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had just messaged Sue that I think I'm going to cry. I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to come home. And someone spotted it, and we all over to the spot, and we all got to see it. And it was like, this was, for me in birding, that was the best day ever. I'm guessing there are a couple birds, the mangrove cuckoo at the end of the year, that was like finally just this relief that you got something that you've wanted the entire year and were able to get on your list.
I think white-fronted goose is probably that.
Oh, we didn't talk about that one.
White-fronted goose shows up to Florida occasionally. Like maybe 1 or 2 a year get spotted. A lot of times they're up in the Panhandle, but not in 2021. Yes, in 2020, no. There was one that's some outside of Naples. We went 3 times. Never found it.
Everyone's it's right in the front. No, it's never in the
like
front. It's never there.
Give us a parking lot. Like
it's right there. No, it's not right there. But it was just like, oh, I don't see.
We mostly chased during the summer. I think that was one of our very few summer things that we chased after. And then we never got it. And then the reports just disappeared on that bird. I don't think it's ever been reported again. There's one down in Key West that has been at the Stock Island golf course for several years because apparently it showed up in Key West. It was injured. It got rehabbed. It got released. And it's been at this golf course for years. So it's a wild bird, even though it's hanging out with Muscovy ducks and other exotics or whatever, but it's a wild bird. We went 2 or 3 times down to Key West before that and couldn't get let onto the golf course. We tried to buy a round of golf. So that didn't work for us. People told us like there's this spot by the fence that you can stand and sometimes it's there. And it's like, it's right along the main highway in Key West, US 1, but we didn't have that luck. I think it was a couple days before Christmas. We were down in Key West and then we tried for the white-fronted goose again and finally got, and that's definitely one of those birds. It was like, oh yes, we're done with that.
And I was like, look, it's right there.
Yeah. They literally pulled over 2 tires on the sidewalk, just like in the middle of live traffic, grabbed some photos, and then got into the car and drove away.
My bird on the way to Key West is the Antillean nighthawk at the airport. Standing at that fence, seeing all the lumps in the grass and trying to figure out if I'm seeing it, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, yeah. So couples show up every year in the Keys. I don't know if they're showing up to the exact same place every year. I haven't checked on them in the last 3 years, but it seems like a bird that shows up somewhere in the Middle Keys pretty much every year. The first birder has to find it and then spend a few days trying to figure out where it spends a day at.
I've had a great time and might have to pick another time and continue chatting about other aspects of your birding life, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did. Next month, we will be returning to Canada and speaking to Gavin McKinnon, who saw over 400 species in 2023. He was very helpful to me back in 2022 with intel on southern Alberta songbirds, including lark bunting and thick-billed longspur. Well, my allergies have got the best of me. My head feels like it's filled with teddy bear stuffing, so I'm going to lie down. Have a fun migration season, and please come back and hear me again in May. Bye-bye. With intel on southern Florida, you kidding me? On southern Alberta songbirds, including lark bunting and thick-billed vireo. No, start again. I'm actually reading this, and yet I'm saying the wrong words. My head is filled with cotton batton. My head is filled with stuffing.